our working definition of mindfulness. Mindfulness is paying attention to what I'm doing while I'm doing it, and noticing my experience of doing it. So there's two parts. There's paying attention, being focused, being attentive to what I'm doing. Okay? So that's primary, that's first. But as I am doing that, I have an experience of that, right? As I am doing this thing, thoughts come up, feelings come up, sensations in my body, okay? Perhaps insights, okay? So what I want to do then is to pay attention and then notice my experience of it, because my experience of it can provide me with valuable information which may enable me to do what I'm doing even better than I'm already doing it, okay? And it may allow me to notice things that could get in the way of doing what I'm doing well. And I gave the example of talking to my wife about an issue. And if there's any kind of emotion involved, I could have a tendency to be angry or defensive, and that's the case, okay? So I'm talking to my wife, I'm paying attention to my wife, I'm listening to her, but I'm also listening to my own experience of this event. And I notice there's like this hurt or this anger kind of here, okay? And so I acknowledge that, but I continue to pay attention. If I weren't really paying attention to, or noticing my experience, this stuff here could influence my behavior in ways that I don't want to. Which brings us back to the definition and the mechanics of, or rather the mechanics of mindfulness. Mindfulness considers what? Intention. What is my intention in this situation? It's to listen to my wife, okay? Number two, what is my attitude? What attitude do I bring to this particular situation? And that begins with checking my attitude at the door, right? What is my attitude in this moment? Well, I notice that I am defensive. I notice that I am angry. There's even a little something inside of me that says I want to get back, get even. Maybe it's not all of that, but maybe it's some of that. Or maybe it's just like, a real kind of a warmth kind of thing. But I need to check my attitude at the door. And then, knowing what my attitude is, then I choose the attitude I'm going to bring to the situation. Again, there's that intentionality. But we're choosing out of awareness. We're choosing out of awareness. And then, having done that, then we do what we're going to do, we pay attention. So mindfulness is always intentional, okay? And we want to be intentional in the attitude we bring to the situation, acknowledging our starting point, and then pay attention. So I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm listening to my wife, I'm paying attention to her, okay? But I'm also noticing my experience. And it's really fun in the interpersonal course. We start out talking about blocks. We talk about all the stuff that goes on in our heads while we're listening to the other person. And some of that stuff we may think is beneficial, but we compare, we evaluate, or we rehearse, or we're getting ready to give advice. And so there's a lot of activity going on in our minds that can get in the way of really listening. So if I'm really paying attention to my wife and then just kind of noticing this rather than participating in it, that's a whole different experience. You follow the logic of what I'm saying? So what we're trying to do in here is develop or come to understand what mindfulness is, and then develop some ways that we can use it on a daily basis throughout our lives. Now, there's formal practice where we can do sitting meditation, and we can pay attention to the breath, the body, the thoughts, the feelings. There's walking meditation and yoga where you can pay attention to the motion and the breath. And I know Carol's a runner, and she's talked about doing that mindfully and being really present to the experience of running. And when we're really present to the experience of running, it really improves our performance, doesn't it, Carol? We're just talking about that, Carol. Carol's an avid runner, and she's noticed that it really enhances her performance. And of course, as we look at all the research that's been done over especially the last 10 years, we know that that's exactly the case. What we know is that mindfulness becomes a precondition to doing other things well. So, as a precondition to doing other things well. How many of you are familiar with, please come in. In this course, what we're doing is we're talking about mindfulness per se, intention, attitude, and attention. But today we're talking about emotional intelligence. And next week we're talking about self-compassion. And after that, we're talking about positive thinking. There is a convergence with all of these. There is a sharedness. And in order to do each of those things well, self-compassion, positive thinking, emotional intelligence, mindfulness is a precondition to doing it well. Do you understand? Mindfulness is a precondition to doing it well. You can do it, but not as well, perhaps even do it poorly. Very quick example, positive thinking. It isn't enough to have positive thinking, although that's invaluable, but it starts with recognizing the negative thinking. And so to be able to replace the negative thinking with positive thinking, I need to first recognize what the negative thinking is. And so that's where mindfulness comes in. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to take a few minutes of quiet time, and then I'm going to very briefly talk to you about this, about emotional intelligence, and then I have a video for you. It is by Shauna Shapiro, and that name should be familiar. She was on the list I provided you. She's the one, she and her colleagues, that first identified the mechanisms of mindfulness in 2006. And this is a video of her explaining that, and as you listen to that, you'll begin to see the connection between mindfulness and what it is to be emotional intelligent, because there is a tremendous convergence here. They're not isomorphic, they're not the same, but they're very, very similar. You cannot have real emotional intelligence without being mindful. That's a requirement of emotional intelligence. And you may in fact have it, you just don't have that language. Okay, so let's take some quiet time. Putting aside any distractions, making sure our cell phones are disarmed, and finding a comfortable seat. Thank you all for being here on such a beautiful day. As much as I love it and as important as it is to me, I was tempted just to get out and enjoy this wonderful weather. So finding our seats, what does that mean to find our seats? That means that we want to sit in a way that is supportive of full, expansive breathing. We want to sit in a way that really helps us to have that sense of being awake. And so that might look something like having a nice straight back, a long neck. That might look like something having feet flat on the floor. But it doesn't have to look that way. The important thing is finding a posture that allows you to breathe and pay attention. So finding that posture now, closing your eyes or gazing gently down in front of you. Well, here we are for another Lunch and Learn series on mindfulness and how we can become more mindful in our daily activities and the things that are important to us. And so we appreciate the fact that we've come together for this opportunity to learn from each other, to take care of ourselves, and just to arrive in this time, in this place, at this moment. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, but simply be in this moment, right here, right now. And so bringing our attention to the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath, breathing in and breathing out. Simply allowing the breath to breathe. Through no effort of our own, we breathe in and out. And in paying attention to the breath, we find that place in the breath where the breath is most noticeable, most alive for us. It could be in the area of the nose. Noticing the cool air coming in and the warm air going out. Or in the area of the chest, noticing how the chest rises and falls with the in-breath and the out-breath. Or perhaps in the area of the stomach and abdomen, noticing how that area expands and contracts with the in-breath and out-breath. You might notice as you follow the breath from beginning to end and back that the in-breath begins down in the belly. It begins to grow and expand through the diaphragm up into the area of the chest until the entire upper torso is full. And then as we exhale, we empty from the top down, from the chest, down through the diaphragm, and finally into the abdomen. So noticing the full expanse of the breath in the body, coming in and going out. And then bringing the attention to that place in the breath where the breath is most noticeable for you, your sweet spot. The nose, the chest, the stomach, perhaps some other place entirely. Allowing the breath to have its way with you. A breath that's steady, a breath that's easy, a breath that's natural, a breath that's alive. Your breath. So spending time with the breath, paying attention, noticing what comes up around that breath. And when distracted, if our mind wanders, when we're ready, if we choose, we can always come back to the breath. Anytime, any place. So paying attention, distracted, coming back again, developing that mindfulness muscle. So taking just a moment more to pay attention to the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath. Perhaps some of you want to share some of what that was like for you. And so that's an opportunity to do so, but certainly no obligation to do so. Yes?
I find it easier to meditate, if I try to do it by myself at my house, if my mind just wanders. So when you're talking through it, my mind will come back.
Yeah.
I think the 3 chimes makes a difference too. It kind of puts you in that mood if you know the third one's coming, you know it's a good setup for it. And lets you out of it as well.
Yeah, both of what you shared is I identify with that. That's been my experience as well. Yeah. Other experiences. Anybody struggling to stay awake? Don't have to admit it. But there's nothing wrong with that. That happens all the time. I'm particularly bad on the body scan. But yet I think, Sharon, you said that you like the body scan, right? Yeah, so hey, you never know. It's different for each of us. Any other thoughts?
Sometimes I just want to stay exactly there and not come out.
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of enjoying it too, but I had to bring it to an end. Yeah. Of course, there's times as we're just present for ourselves, it may not be pleasant, right? Such is life. Life is not always pleasant. It's not always easy. Such is the case with meditation, you know? I mean, we can do kinds of meditation to just feel good. I mean, there is feel-good meditation, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But mindfulness meditation is a different type of meditation. It's about being aware of our awareness. It's about noticing our experience and accessing information that we could not access any other way. There has to be a certain openness, there has to be a pause in our thinking in order for that kind of information to seep up, to bubble up. And that can't be accessed by just feel good. Okay, but there's nothing wrong with feel good. It serves a different purpose. All right? Thank you. Yeah. Okay, you have a handout in front of you, and on the left is the emotional styles that Richard Davidson has been researching, and as far as I know, first talked about in a public arena in his book, The Emotional Life of the Brain. And what he said was that each of us have 6 emotional styles. And what's really interesting is he has found, and other researchers have found, that for each of those emotional styles, there is brain parts and brain functions that correlate with it. And so, for example, let's look at the second one down called outlook. One can have a positive outlook or negative outlook. Okay, so what he has found is that when a person has a negative outlook, it tends to locate towards the left side of the prefrontal cortex. Okay, and this is an area of the brain that's often associated with more critical kinds of thinking, negative thinking, and negative not in a bad way necessarily. But what happens is people that are mindful, and not just through mindful meditation, they tend to have more activity over on this side, which tends to be more positive emotions. So more negative emotions, more positive emotions. So he notices that there's correlation. But what they've also begun to notice in the research, that as people develop mindfulness practices, what happens is their activity moves from here to here. And we know from the research that what people do is they not only develop new neural pathways, but you can develop new gray matter. In fact, what's his name? I forget. But he talks about how if you spend 13 seconds paying attention to a single object, you create new gray matter in the brain. If you can 13 seconds, brand new gray matter. It doesn't matter how old you are, you can develop new gray matter. And you can develop new neural pathways. So his research is, his styles are tied to the research that's going on out there. So, so that's something to take a look at. And if anybody's interested in any of that, I have his surveys that you can take to find out what your emotional styles are. Okay. So just very quickly going through them, you have emotional resilience. That's the ability to bounce back from strong emotion. To not be hurt as badly and to bounce back more quickly. Something that I experienced very quickly when I took up meditation after taking the MBSR course. Outlook we discussed. Social intuition. Self-awareness, sensitivity, context, and attention. And I'm skipping over theirs because what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to the emotional intelligence and point out the parallels. Now, emotional intelligence was developed 20 years ago by Dan Goleman. And I remember when I first saw his work, I said, this is great. This is what we're trying to do in interpersonal communication. And this is what they are already trying to do in psychology and counseling and a lot of other social sciences and working with people. Okay? But it was basically what he said is the best leaders. And this guy studied top CEOs, all over, the top. And he found that the thing that characterized the top leaders was emotional intelligence. What does emotional intelligence mean? In real simple terms, it means the ability to work with people. And the ability to work with people depends on the ability to read people, to know where they're at emotionally, to know where they're at psychically, and then be able to adapt your communication, your behavior to that. But that also requires, to some extent, some recognition of one's own emotions. Now, let's be careful here. Just because someone's emotionally intelligent, they have some self-awareness and they have awareness in others, doesn't mean that they're a nice person or necessarily ethical. Okay? So one does not equal the other. They often do, but they don't necessarily. So emotional intelligence. And interestingly, one of the ways to become emotionally intelligent is to develop a sensitivity to nonverbal communication, which is our subject in 3 weeks. We'll be going into nonverbal communication. If you haven't noticed, there's a progression here. What we're doing is we're working on the interior first, on us. becoming mindful. And then we start moving on the exterior. Then we begin to look at the other, okay? But the most valuable information in any kind of communication is always within. And our best choices, our wise choices, are always there when we're fully informed. So we want to make sure that we have that mindfulness foundation before we plunge into relationships with others. But we'll be getting to nonverbal, we'll be getting to listening, we'll be getting empathy, reciprocity. Those are all other. Okay, a lot of talk today. I apologize, but I feel I need to cover this. So this is interesting. Look what he has here. He talked about emotional intelligence is self-regulation. Same thing that's in mindfulness. Self-regulation means that I have emotional resilience. It means that my thinking and my emotions are not getting the best of me, okay? In other words, I'm not acting impulsively, I'm not acting obsessively, that I'm acting out of awareness, okay? There's some sense of knowing what my attitude is going into this. So self-regulation. And the other thing that the research shows, that a little bit of mindfulness can lead to a lot of self-regulation. Okay, so motivation, empathy, self-awareness, social skill. Now look at the equivalencies. These aren't exactly the same, but emotional resilience in emotional styles is very much like self-regulation. Outlook is very much like motivation. If I have a positive outlook, I'm motivated. If I have a negative outlook, I'm unmotivated. Social intuition is very much like empathy. Self-awareness is self-awareness. And sensitivity to conscience is what I would call social skill. And then, of course, the sixth one on emotional styles is intention. And I say attention is implicit. It's a precondition to all the others. So, where am I going with this? The idea is that if we are mindful, if we're present to ourselves and to the other in this given moment, then we are likely to be emotionally intelligent. Because there is already something happening in us that is changing us. As we become more mindful, we become more emotionally resilient. As we are mindful, we become more attentive. Okay? As we are mindful over time, we become more self-compassionate, which is next week. And so these things kind of happen when we're mindful. But we have to bring that attitude to the experience. And so we begin to experience a different relationship to ourselves, different insight in ourselves, different awareness of ourselves, which then translates into our relationships with others. Like it or not, the quality of our outsides are determined by the quality of our insides. You really want to make a change there and with that and that person, it all begins with us. Okay? And then we can bring something to the game that can really make a difference. Okay, now that's a lot of information. Do you want to sort any of that out? You have any questions about that? Okay. My goal here is really just to give you a feel and communicate that mindfulness is the key. That's the starting point. That's the starting point to doing anything well. And it's interesting, we have mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. We have acceptance therapy. We have social emotional learning in education. Okay, we have experiential learning in education. Let's see what else is there. The research in positive thinking, and all of this. What do they all have in common? Mindfulness is a precondition to doing each of those well. Mindfulness is a precondition to doing anything well, really well. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to share Shauna Shapira with you.
The model of mindfulness that I want to present involves these three core elements of intention, attention, and attitude. And I want to talk about each of these. This is the definition from our book. Mindfulness is the awareness that arises out of intentionally paying attention in an open, kind, and discerning way. So this is all we're trying to do. It doesn't necessarily have to do with meditation practice. We practice so we can remember to be this way moment by moment. So first I'll speak about intention. Intention is simply knowing why you're doing what you're doing. What is your aspiration, your vision, your personal goal? Intention really sets the compass of our heart. It says, this is the direction I want to go in. Not necessarily I must get there, but this is the direction I want to head. It's not a destination. It's not goal-oriented. We're not striving to get a certain place. We're just setting the compass of our heart. John Kabat-Zinn says, your intentions set the stage for what is possible. They remind you from moment to moment of why you are practicing. He says, I used to think meditation practice was so powerful that as long as you did it at all, you would see growth and change. But time has taught me that some kind of personal vision is necessary. I'll give you a very simple example that happened last year. I was teaching in Europe for 2 weeks, and it was the longest I'd been away from my little boy, Jackson. And as I was flying home, I was having all these feelings of guilt, right? He was 7 at the time, and I felt like it's too long to have been away, and should I have done this, and it was wrong, and I realized guilt wasn't really helping. So I made a very clear intention. When I get home, I just want to be with my son, and I want him to know Mom's home, and that I love him, and he's safe. And that's it. I'm not going to check email. I'm not going to check my mail. I'm really going to focus. I was getting home on a Friday night, and I figured Saturday we were going to spend the entire day together, and that was it. And we were going to go to the beach. So we woke up the next morning, and I start packing up for the beach and making the perfect lunch and the perfect picnic and getting all his stuff and really excited to show him how much I love him. And he, in the meantime, was like, hey, Mom, come look at this. Hey, Mom. And I was like, okay, just a second. Still doing my thing. Yeah, this isn't going to turn out well. And so we're starting to go get ready to the beach. And I'm like, hey, Jackson, let's go. And he's like, I don't really want to go to the beach. I was like, honey, come on. It's beautiful. It's sunny. We're going to the beach. He's like, okay, puts on his bathing suit. We're walking out the door, and I'm like 5 steps ahead of him. And I get to the car, and I look back, and he's sitting down on our front porch. And I'm like, Jackson. And I feel that kind of contraction in my body, a little bit of impatience. And he's just sitting there. And I start noticing the tension in my body of I have an agenda and I have a plan. It's going to be wonderful. Luckily, I'd been teaching mindfulness for the past 2 weeks straight. So I had this moment of awareness, and I reflected, what's my intention? Oh, yeah, I just want him to know that I love him and that I'm home. And so I walked back over, and I sat down next to him. And he was looking at these ants. That's actually why he was sitting there. And they were pretty extraordinary. And I sat down next to him, and I just sat there quietly, and I was breathing, and I was with him. And he kind of leaned his little body into my body. And I could feel the sun on our backs, and I could feel us resting, us connecting. And that was it. That was the most important thing, right? So our intention reminds us what is most important. And it can be that simple. So present moment awareness is essential if we're going to see clearly, right? That's the definition of mindfulness. And yet what we found, in fact, this study was published, I think, 2 years ago with 650,000 subjects, is that our mind wanders approximately half the time. They found that 46.9% of the time, your mind is wandering. That's a lot of your life. So part of this practice is learning how to attend in the present moment. And it doesn't mean we shut out our thoughts. It doesn't mean we no longer have any thoughts. We have 12 to 50,000 thoughts every single day. You're not going to make those go away. What we start to do is change our relationship to thinking so that we can rest more in the actuality of the present moment. So we don't believe our thoughts so much. I love this quote from Emo Phillips. He says, I used to think the brain was the most wonderful organ in my body. Then I realized he was telling me this. Right? Right? Don't believe your thoughts. Okay. So the intention with mindfulness is that we train and stabilize our attention in the present moment so that we can see clearly. I actually believe one of the most healing dimensions of mindfulness is just that our mind and our body are in one place. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to be sitting here and have your mind racing all over the place. So part of this practice is learning how to just let ourselves rest in the present moment and know that where we are is okay. This is enough. So this is a picture of a monastery that I visited when I was first learning about meditation. And when I first went there, I didn't know anything about meditation. I was about 19 or 20 years old. I didn't speak any Thai. And this beautiful monk invited me in for this 12-day silent retreat, and he didn't speak any English. So he kind of, made it clear that I was supposed to attend to my breath going in and out of my nostrils. I said, I can probably handle that. Pay attention in the present moment to the breath. So I'm sitting there, and guess what I noticed? It's not so easy, right? My mind wandered, and it would wander off, and I'd bring it back, and I would try harder, and I would try harder, and I would try harder, and I got really impatient and really frustrated, and I would sit there and I would breathe, and my mind would wander off, and eventually I was like, damn it, Shauna, what's wrong with you? Why can't you do this? And who do you think you are to try to be a meditator? You're not a meditator. You don't know what you're doing. And then all of a sudden, by like the second or third day, I was looking around at everyone else at the monastery, and I'm like, who do they think they are? And, just this judgmental mind of like tension and contraction. And then this monk on day 4 flew in from London, and he spoke English. And I said, can I please have an interview with him? Because you're in silence the whole time, too, so it's just you and your mind. It's uncomfortable. Yeah. I remember now, Anne Lamott, who is one of my favorite authors, she says, your mind is like a dangerous neighborhood. You don't want to go there alone. So it was me and my mind alone, and it was dangerous. And this monk came in, and he said, how's it going? And I was like, not so well. This is what's happening. I'm getting really angry at myself and anxious and judgmental, and I'm striving and I'm trying. And he looks at me and he goes, oh, dear. He's like, you're not practicing mindfulness. He said, you're practicing frustration, anxiety, impatience. And then he said these 5 words that really changed my life. He said, what you practice becomes stronger. What you practice becomes stronger. We know this now from neuroplasticity. We know that your repeated experiences shape your brain. What he said was that when you practice paying attention, how you practice is important. Your attitude. Are you paying attention with acceptance, with openness, with curiosity? What does it feel like to be hot or to have your mind wander off? With kindness, with gentleness, with warmth, with a sense of trust. This is what's happening right now, and it's okay, because it's just what's happening. I might not like it, but it's already happening, so can I be present with it and kind? These qualities, these attitudes, it doesn't mean that you feel happy all the time. It doesn't mean that everything's okay all the time. What it means is that you have this big pot of experience, and that whatever is arising, you're holding with kindness. You're holding your fear with kindness. You're holding your sadness with kindness and with curiosity. You're interested in your own experience. You're interested in what it feels like to be alive. Sometimes I think of it as like I'm my own parent, and like my little Shauna's coming to me and saying like, I'm really angry right now. And I'm like, tell me about it. What's going on? Right? I'm not trying to make it go away. I'm not trying to tell her she needs to feel happy and joyful all the time, but I'm holding it with kindness, and it's okay. With my patients, there's a way in which whatever they bring into the room is absolutely okay. It's absolutely okay. I first have to get there with myself, though. I first have to allow myself to be absolutely okay with however I'm feeling. This is just what I'm feeling right now. This is just what's happening right now. And it's okay. And I can be with it.
So any thoughts, comments, reflections on this talk by Shauna?
In other words, what you practice becomes stronger. It obviously it stuck with her and she emphasized it, but it kind of stuck with me too because I was thinking it is very easy to kind of give lip service to the idea of mindfulness and then not really embrace it a lot or improve that or strengthen that muscle. And then it's easy to be practicing, like she said, anxiety, frustration, and all of those negative things all of the time. And I like how she talked about it. It's not something that makes everything okay all the time or makes you feel happy all the time. But kind of like when you said what you said earlier about it's the start of doing anything well. I think it's the start of finding that clarity to make everything.
Yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh in his book Miracle of Mindfulness uses a couple metaphors that kind of get at what you just said so well. He talks about how he uses the metaphor of the finger pointing to the moon and the boat that you use to cross the river. And it's like you come to a river, there's the boat will get you across the river. But what happens is some people, when they get to the other side of the river, they start carrying the boat around on their shoulders. Or rather than just, and then the finger pointing to the moon, rather than looking to the moon, which is after all what the agenda is all about, they get hung upon the agenda. And so he was saying in his way what I thought you said so well, is that yeah. It was her agenda, which was different than what? Her intention? Yeah. But notice what happened when she became mindful and she began to sense into her body and to connect with some feelings. And then she connected with some of her thoughts. And then out of that information, she was able then to reset her intention and then bring that kindness to that situation. Yeah, thank you. Did you find that moving at all? Did you sense it at all in your body or in your emotion? I mean, I know I was. And I've seen this video a number of times. It was really good to see.
I thought that was just said in your own And, as a parent now, my kids are all over, we have these great friends, so we such a fun day. You will have fun, right? And that was, instead of getting in the car, hey, so we're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, and I thought that she used kind of the analogy or the metaphor of parenting, being a parent to ourselves. Kind of assuming that as a parent we would be kind, we would be curious, we would be interested, we would be patient. So if that helps us by adopting that role to have those qualities, that's great. Yeah. She talked about this pot of experience. Here I am doing what I'm doing, paying attention to what I'm doing while I'm doing it, noticing my experience of what I'm doing it, and my experiences all of them are in this great big giant container, okay? And my experiences of what I'm doing. And either I'm aware of them or I'm not, okay? And we've already discussed the value of being aware of them, but here's this container of experience. And so how am I going to hold this? What kind of container is this in? And that's where the attitude is important. Is it in a container of kindness? Is it a container of compassion? And so I think that's a very important idea. So as we are mindful, we become aware of maybe what we are and would rather not be, and out of that choose, because a lot of us are very, very judgmental, aren't we? We're very hard on ourselves. We should ourselves. And so once we acknowledge that, out of that awareness, we can choose what? I know that that's the way I am to myself. I notice the thoughts that go with that. I feel the feelings that go with that. I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. But out of that, I choose kindness, because I know kindness. And so they're all together in this big container of experience. The shoulds haven't gone away, okay? They're still there, but I have chosen, rather, in this container of experience, kindness. And so that's what I'm going to practice. I'm going to practice the kindness, not the judgment. And what happens? The kindness grows. The judgment, doesn't die, but it can wither over time because the brain changes. And so after a while, it becomes more natural. We're more inclined that way. We're more inclined towards kindness than we are judgment. And we can pretty much do that on our own with a little help from others.
Have we ever done studies with this and with high blood pressure, for instance? Is there a correlation? If you finally have, if you're able to exercise your mind and you're able to obtain the, I'll say, strength to be mindful, to keep on coming back and be gentle, as you choose that.
I am familiar with a lot of research on mindfulness and health generally, not specifically blood pressure. But we do know, and it was just a study that came out just not too long ago, that we know that there's a definite strong correlation between stress, high blood pressure, and heart disease. That's unquestioned. And we also know that mindfulness really reduces stress. That's why when John Kabat-Zinn developed the course back in the late 70s, he called it the mindfulness-based stress reduction course. Because stress should be psychological, it can be physiological. If it's one, it's typically the other. But so my best guess is, without a doubt. I just haven't seen the actual studies on that, so that's kind of an assumption on my part, but I don't think it's unreasonable. Well, we're just about done, so what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 minutes of quiet time, okay? So find your seats again. What I want you to do is I want you to have the opportunity when you leave here to start the rest of your day with intention, attitude, and attention. So finding your seats, closing your eyes or gazing gently down in front of you. So finding the breath, that sweet spot on the breath. Somewhere in the torso, perhaps in the area of the nose, perhaps in other places in the body, but noticing, paying attention to the body and the breath in the body. The in-breath and the out-breath. Breathing in and breathing out. Knowing that each breath and each moment are unique. So a breath at a time, a moment at a time. Bringing the mind into the moment by paying attention to the breath. Knowing that if we're distracted, as we go about our day, if we lose focus, we can always come back to the breath. The breath is always there, always steady, always natural, always alive, always present. So paying attention to the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath. One breath at a time, one moment at a time. The in-breath and the out-breath.